Imagine your best friend gets murdered.
Hey.
You call the cops, expecting a team equipped with gloves, evidence bags, testing skills. I don't know why I did it like this. All of that. Instead, they trample all of the evidence that could have led them directly to your friend's killer. This would be an outrage in today's society. But back then being the 1800s, this was normal. Investigators were simply not investigating back then, and they didn't have the proper training to even know what investigating was.
You see, there was this one grandma who had had enough. She decided that she would contribute the rest of her life to teaching the cops how to cop. She was a real-life CSI investigation episode. She used her womanly grandma craft skills for good to build incredibly accurate models of real-life crime scenes to teach the police how to investigate. By the way, Grandma also became the first female police captain in the United States. This is the story of Frances Glessner Lee, also known as the mother of forensic science.
Intro. Do 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 do. So today we're straying a little bit from traditional STEM sciences, and we're talking about forensic science, which is an integral part of catching and prosecuting criminals.
Okay.
We're joined by our friends Sienna and Rihanna. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
But Rihanna's about to get deployed, and
No, I'm not.
so she came down, and they just graduated with their degrees in criminal justice. So we thought we'd incorporate them. Before we do a deep dive on Frances Glessner Lee, we need to establish the history of policing and investigative science. The first policing organization, known as the Sab-Heri-Seker, was in ancient Egypt, 3000 BC. Sab-Heri-Seker, or Chief of Hitters, aka Chief of Police, whose main job, or their main job, was tax collection. Then in ancient Greece, they had magistrates, which are more or less described as just keeping the peace. Yes.
Sorry, magistrate is still a term we use now, but it's like a magistrate judge.
I see.
So
It sounds like a wizard.
it does. It does.
There consistently appears to be a trend of police whose jobs are mainly conflict solving, because issues back then were more civil disputes. If there were serial killers back then, I am unsure if there even were.
You don't
There
deserve
definitely
killers
were.
back then?
But like in
They
like,
just weren't caught.
ancient Egypt? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there was.
I mean, I can't. None of us are 100% certain, but I feel like there would be.
There probably has always been.
Yeah.
There was this one lady. It's like I think she was from France. I think she's termed like the first serial killer.
Maybe like first serial killer like caught.
Yeah, first serial killer like documented.
Documented, but I feel like that's just been
Right, they just thought people mysteriously died. So actually,
was it like the woman in the castle and like
I think so.
Yeah, I know who you're
Yes,
talking
yes,
about.
yes,
She was
yes.
like the vampire or something.
Yes, yeah, she like killed people and like bathed in their blood or
Yeah.
drank their blood or
It
something.
was like
Ew,
some
wow.
kind of Madame LaRue.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I guess back then they didn't know serial killers were a thing, and I found this on Reddit, so I'm not entirely sure if this is true. But
It's obviously true.
apparently people would just be like, oh, you know, grandma got her throat slashed. Guess it was a werewolf. Like, they just attributed everything to like...
Well, were werewolves a thing in Egyptian mythology?
I don't think werewolves were, but I think like it was like some sort of like supernatural,
Yeah.
thingy-majig or something of the sort.
Definitely couldn't be another human. In the 9th century, responsibility shifted from the community, so there was something called the hue and cry, which was like raising an alarm that there was a criminal and then pursuing said criminal. This was supposedly mandatory, and people would face punishment if they didn't do so. So kind of like a mandatory neighborhood watch. So basically, if someone said that they saw you do something and there were no witnesses to corroborate the information, that kind of sucks because you were going to be accused and found guilty. There was no real way of investigating to solve these crimes. I imagine it had something to do with social status and reverence. Like, if the local drunkard accused a nobleman of a crime, they're going to be like, I don't think we believe you. We're obviously going to believe the person with the higher social status. We're going to believe the nobleman.
So, quick side story. I would kind of mention like the neighborhood watch. So when we first bought this house, my dad went outside and was like taking pictures of the house and like showing me and my mom like what the house looked like because we weren't able to like come on the tour. And our neighbor like ran outside, or I guess she's not our neighbor anymore, but the neighbor at the time ran outside the other house and was like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you taking pictures of our house? Like, get out of here!" And I guess she was being neighborhood watchly. And my dad was like, "Ma'am, I'm trying to buy this house." He said, "Oh," and then she left. So. Neighborhood Watch Corps.
I feel like I probably shouldn't say this online, but still, like in my neighborhood, we have the signs that say "neighborhood watch," but nobody's watching. Nobody's watching. It's just a sign that like it's supposed to scare criminals away. Like, wow, the neighborhood's watching you. Like, oh wow, it's terrible. But
now we have like those Facebook like crime blogs where people are like, guys, I saw a kid like damaging cars. Be on the lookout. Like,
wait, oh my gosh, I think my neighborhood has one.
I think my neighborhood has one too.
Yeah.
Like cars have been.
It will be so random. It'll be like, I saw someone who does not live here, and they're just walking around.
Oh.
Be on the lookout.
Yeah, like they look kind of suspicious.
Oh
Yeah,
my god.
I don't know, wearing a hoodie in the summertime. So now, this is the mostly Western world, but in China around the 12th century, there was a dude by the name, and excuse my pronunciation, but Sun Tzu, who wrote the book The Washing Away of Wrong, which warned readers to pay attention to the most minute details because therein would lie the key to telling the difference between natural death and criminal intent. But I don't think this really got over to Europe very much.
So technically, would he be like for the Western world, like
Eastern world.
I mean, the Eastern world, like forensic?
It was basically like if you look at someone's like I can't remember the exact example, but I think it was like if you look at someone's like trachea and it's like trachea is like a part in your neck, and instead of it being normal, it looks like a little inflamed. But like if you just glance by it, like you couldn't tell. But if it's like a little inflamed, you're like, oh, did they get strangled?
Isn't that like that with the hyoid? Like if the hyoid bone's broken, they're more likely to have been strangled.
Right.
But like then again, it can also just get broken.
Right. Exactly.
So they're looking at the victim and trying to see if anything.
If anything's like off, like I don't like say like instead of if you fall down and your hands are like pushed out, that would imply that like you fell down, rather than if someone's like falling and their arms are like pulled in, it looks like more like a defensive position. But like back then, they would just be like, oh, they fell.
I was gonna say like, and then maybe like when people look at this, they can see like what a natural death looks like versus like what it doesn't look like.
Right.
Even if it's like the trachea is like inflamed, it's like, oh, but if it was not a natural death, it would be a bit more like, different than.
I'm also not entirely sure if like the trachea being inflamed is what signifies strength.
Well, then they could be like, oh, if the trachea is inflamed and it's a little bit of bruising, then like.
Yes, something like that.
You can also like apply it to like, oh, if they have a blow to the head, like.
And it looks like a circle. It's probably done by like a hammer and not just, oh, they fell.
And not like
exactly.
hitting your head on the floor or something. So.
Ding ding. But yeah, so that's what his book was about. And I don't know if it was like used in China or like the Eastern world, but it was definitely like the basis of it.
Yeah.
So then in the 13th century, in England, so we're focusing more on the Western world because that like America's policing system was kind of influenced through like Europe. So the English introduced the idea of constables, who were highborn people, but they were more like security and protection. So investigation and prosecution of crimes were still left to the victims. If something happened to you or your family member, you would just go out with like a hammer and hunt them down. And this led to a profession called the thief takers in the 16th century, and they were pretty much just bounty hunters. They were hired to find criminals for the victims, and it wasn't like evidence-based at all. So like say like I'm like, oh my god, my precious jewels have been stolen, and I'm like, I think Rihanna did it because Rihanna is always coming to my house and she's looking at my jewels. I hire thief taker Sienna. Sienna goes and is like, I got Rihanna for you. Well, it turns out it wasn't Rihanna. It was actually Eva. Eva stole my jewels, and Eva just gets away scot-free. So,
but like, I wonder how much. That probably happened a lot where I'd be like, I'd find the person who did it. I'd be like, I'm gonna take that money from you.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. You definitely have to pay.
Oh, look, no, I'm gonna take that money from.
Like,
like it was corrupt.
And then I'm gonna bring the person to you. Be like, she sold them all, but I brought you the person. Where is my more money? They probably were making bank.
Yeah, it was probably corrupt.
Or just like skipped town and never came back.
Yeah.
Or like take even just like a few jewels and be like, I don't know, they were missing. I only found these.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, investigative tools, quote unquote, were just suspicion of motive, and it wasn't super effective, and a lot of times it was just wrong.
I do want to bring up, like, you said, like, our justice system is based on, like, England's, but I think it's more like the Constitution in the form of government is more based on England, because that's where we came from. But, like, the policing style and stuff, that's all kind of us because it had a lot to do with like slavery.
Yeah.
Because like police kind of started as slave hunters.
Right.
To go and get them.
So in the US, it's not like fully based on Europe, but like the way that policing was, this is like back then, like our policing system now is different, but like it was more like we were pulling ideas from Europe. Like we weren't pulling
our
ideas.
Constitution and all that straight from Europe.
Right. But like it's not like, oh, we saw what like people in Egypt and India and China were doing, and we'll incorporate those principles, because we weren't like interacting with them.
Who were the ones that did like the neighborhood watch style? Because I feel like that's kind of similar to like
that was Europe, just in general, all of Europe.
Yeah, because I feel like that's something that was like, I lost my slave. Please.
Yeah, it was Europe and the US. They both did that, and then like, we had like the constables and everything, and that kind of like started to move its way down, and then like. Once like the whole like enlightenment, I don't remember when the Enlightenment was, but all of their like scientific principles, they started slowly like bleeding over. Not that the whole policing system is based on it. It just like we started to pull more ideas from them than we would have been pulling ideas from the Eastern world.
Yeah, it's just kind of like because policing started as like hunting. It was never like the protect and serve thing is new. Like the police were not created to protect and serve.
I see.
And especially like nowadays, nowadays police are more like being, I don't want to say bought out, but they're more used for like big corporate companies and like, because they give them the more money and that's what they need and stuff like that. So it's still very much like a
security,
kind of, but it's just the whole point of them was never to protect and serve.
I see.
It was to like law and order.
I see. But like back then, now it's changing, right? Trying to.
You could say I would hope so, but it's like
I remember like back in Clemson, they would have like coffee with a cop thing, and it was like the cops would come to like the Douth at Starbucks and like sit with you and like talk, and it was trying to like make it more personable, so like we weren't scared of the cops.
Yeah, I think that's like a big part now. It is like community, like they're trying to build relations, so like we don't see the cops as like against us. And
remember,
we're all one.
Remember when we had that talk with the cop and I asked him a question and he just like, were you there for that?
When was this?
During staff meeting.
Oh, which question was it?
It was like, I think it was something about how 2 male cops will like make their rotations through Manning.
Oh, yeah.
And Manning's like an all-girls dorm, or was an all-girls dorm.
So me and actually all 3 of us were RAs throughout college, not her. But we would have to like work with the cops a lot of times, and so it's, like sometimes like guys or like the male cops walking on like female floors.
They make like a little they do unsolicited walks. They're supposed to walk with the RAs, but they would do it like before or after to catch kids off guard because they would catch on to our schedules, and like they would send like 2 male cops full with their weapons, guns, tasers, all that full stuff, and they would just go through the girls' dorms, and the girls did not have private bathrooms, so they would be in their towels and their bathrobes, and they would just see a cop pop up and we got a lot of complaints that people weren't comfortable about.
I remember being a freshman; that was scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but now the police are protecting and serving. Yay, police!
Well, in 1788, Dr. Nathaniel Grew documented and published that every single person has a unique fingerprint, which is the origin of dactylography.
The pterodactyl.
Like the pterodactyl, because they have the claws in their wings.
And they have wings, yes.
I don't know if they have fingerprints.
No, they definitely don't.
Yeah,
but they have dactyls, because dactyls are your fingers.
Yes.
They are?
Yeah.
That's why it's
a phalange.
Well, phalange is part, so 1 phalange, 2 phalange, 3 phalange. This entire thing is a dactyl.
Oh. Yeah, that's why pterodactyl.
Fun fact!
He, along with other scientists, tried to convince the police to use fingerprinting as a tool in catching criminals to no avail. After this, in the late 1800s, multiple discoveries were made that contributed to the developing field of forensic science. This included changes in body temperature after death to estimate the time of death, chemical testing to indicate the presence of blood, photography, differential hair characteristics, and profiling, which all eventually led to the first crime lab in France.
How do you think They did they would do fingerprinting in the 1800s.
You know, me thinks that they had like tape or clay or powder or chemicals or something, and they could either like blow it over where they like assumed fingerprints were, and like you could see like all the curves.
Fingerprints aren't as distinct. Like finding them, they aren't as distinct as you think. Like
So,
they get smudged a lot.
I'm assuming like if they somehow found a fingerprint out in the field and they were able to like somehow like replicate it or something, they could take like clay or like put the suspect's like fingerprint and compare them and see. I imagine it wasn't super precise back then.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't really think they, as long as it was. As long as it was more precise than what it was, I think they were just like progress. Like this is good enough, basically.
I bet it was super hard to get like the suspects' fingerprints because there wasn't like a database or anything. So you'd have to like track them down and be like, I need your finger.
I'll give it to you exactly.
And then they just
Science got to start somewhere.
Save the clay prints. What do they do with those? Put them in storage.
Sure.
Well, America got its first crime lab in 1924. This is where weapon and bullet comparison became more popularized. It's very America. This is where Francis Glessner Lee comes in. Despite the developing field of forensic science, catching and prosecuting criminals was still very difficult. It was better than blatant accusations like before, but there were still limited ways to collect evidence, and it definitely wasn't as good as like DNA collection, which is what we have now in the 20th century. But I think this goes without saying, females in policing and investigative science were not common, and they were certainly frowned upon.
Now that you know the origins of policing and forensic science, let's talk about our girl, Frances Glessner Lee. So Frances was born in 1878 in Chicago, Illinois, and she was named after her mother, Frances. Eva's also named after her mother. So Eva's mom is also Eva.
Yippee!
And when Eva puts her emergency contact down, she also has to write Eva, and she has to say, "This is my mom."
I put my mom in parentheses because I've had people be like, hey, so you can't put yourself as your emergency contact. And I'm like, please, I'm not, I promise. Anyway.
I don't think Frances had emergency contacts back in the day.
She was probably fine.
Never mind.
I don't think they had emergency contacts.
Yeah, they probably didn't.
No field trip waiver?
In her homeschooling.
So her father, John J. Glessner, worked as the vice president for the International Harvester, which was like manufacturing automotive like harvesting tools, and it made her family incredibly well off. Frances and her brother George were born into a life of Gilded Age luxury. Not much is known about her early life except for she received an education at home from private tutors, so I don't think she had to sign a waiver for an emergency contact for field trips.
Sorry.
She was taught more feminine arts such as interior design, metalwork, not like
Metalwork.
not like
No,
bing bang boom metalwork. I think it when you say metalwork, I think that you have a hammer and an anvil. So she probably was like jewelry
like,
making.
Definitely not welding.
I was like, fire coming off, things are real hot.
But that sewing, knitting, crocheting, painting, and like she just learned all of that. From
So you
her
think it's
female
more like
relatives.
jewelry making than metalworking?
Do you think that's just what they call jewelry making? Like, is that actually what they call jewelry making?
I don't know, Eva.
I don't know. This was from one of the sources, and they said that she learned metalworking, and I was thinking like teeny tiny metal piece things because, as Disha's about to say, she made miniatures, and you need like things to put in the miniature. So maybe she was like cutting up pieces of metal to put in her dioramas.
That does make sense.
Dioramas.
Diorama.
Dioramas.
Diorama.
Okay. there you
Tomato,
go.
tomato.
Regardless, she made miniatures, which are like tiny little like houses where like they have like every single detail of everything that was in the house down to like the pencil erasings on the paper.
Who else made metalworkings?
Oh my God, Henry Cavill! I love Henry Cavill.
Let's try that again. Henry who?
Henry Cavill.
Cavill.
So I love Henry Cavill. Cavill.
You're back.
Anyways, so he makes miniatures for his little game Warhammer, which he talks about a lot. And so miniatures are still a thing like nowadays, but they're more associated with like gaming. Like female artistry is not miniatures anymore.
Anyway, the take of this is it Cavill or Cavill?
Let us know in the comments below. We'll also put a picture here if you don't somehow know who Henry Cavill is.
The Witcher. He's my only Witcher.
What, isn't it supposed to be Liam Hemsworth right now?
He's my only Witcher.
Yeah, that's why she said that.
I know, but like
Up for debate.
Is that out yet? His
Debate
version?
number 2.
I'm so confused.
Regardless.
So, Frances had dreamed of studying medicine, perhaps even law, and you think with all the money that her family has, it would be easy peasy to get her into like a school or something. Well, her parents, no. They said absolutely not.
You are a woman.
Know your place.
Ladies do not go to school.
Sit down and crochet.
Eva would love that.
Yo! Hold on. I'm very happy to go to college. Anyway.
Oh, I
Go to
meant the
college and
crocheting.
crochet.
I thought you meant like glad
No. I know you like
to be
college.
a woman in the 1800s.
No, I think you would just like crocheting. I also think you like to be educated.
I do like crocheting. Regardless, her brother did not know how to crochet. He went to go study medicine at Harvard. I bet they had some crazy sibling fights. So, instead of going to college and all that, she got married at 19 years old to an up-and-coming attorney named Blewett Lee.
Blewett.
At least she's very sort of rich, I guess. Not that she's
Up
already...
and coming. Wow.
Isn't-
Yeah, what if he up and didn't come?
Be open with
Up. Oh my god, I can't.
Up and...
Continue.
Up and downward trajectory.
So, her and Blewett had 3 children together, and they ended up divorcing in 1914. They had a long separation before their divorce, in which she had rediscovered the art of miniatures. Her first miniature build since her early childhood was a gift for her mother's birthday in 1913. She had built her mom a replica of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra with every single little detail included. And when I say every detail, I mean there were 90 musicians, each with their instruments, their sheet music, the stands for the sheet music, their instrument cases, and any other various details. So it's noted that she somehow managed to complete this model and all of its like extreme accuracy in only 2 months.
Because she don't have a job.
She don't got no job.
I feel like every gift I've given to my mom is like really sad compared to this.
Yeah.
Like, here, mom, here's a car.
Oh my god, I remember I was like, we're moving, so I was going through all like my stuff that I had from when I was little, and I made my mom like a book of like, I love my mom from like 3rd grade. And like one of them, it's like a really bad picture. It's like my mom's favorite thing to do when she comes home.
Oh, you did tell me this.
It says my mom's favorite thing to do when she comes home is clean. If my kid wrote that about me, I would cry. And it's like it's a really bad picture of her like on all fours, like rubbing the towel, like scrubbing the bathroom, except for it's drawn in like crayons, so like you can see like the outline of this stick figure, and then me trying to draw clothes on top of it. It was really bad.
Did you show it to her?
Yeah.
Like recently?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you ask her how she felt about it?
No.
She probably wanted that instead. Yeah,
I'm sorry, Mom. I
Did
can't
she
make
probably
you
just
miniatures.
go and then walk away?
She thought the rest of it was nice.
Okay.
Just not that one. But I'm sorry, Mom. I can't make miniatures. I'm not artistic. I'm probably the least artistic person in our friend group. I can't.
I would do it better.
I think I can beat you.
And
You
like
color.
being worst.
Girl, I just color in the lines.
I don't even.
I don't even
color.
do that.
Yeah.
This takes
That's
talent.
a you choice, okay?
But Frances is interesting because she didn't start the work that left her legacy until she was 44. So there's hope for me and Eva because we're in gap years, and so maybe our life won't end at the end of this year.
Life goes
Why
on
did you
after
think
20.
it was? She's like 22, unemployed. I can't do it.
But at 44, she developed an interest in crime when her brother's good friend, George Burgess McGrath, would often tell stories of mystery and crime that he helped solve. So George McGrath attended Harvard with her brother and was studying medicine with a particular interest in death investigation.
Wait, do we know, like, was he solving crimes while learning about death investigations, or was he, like, doing something else?
I'm assuming it was probably like an apprenticeship, like most things back in the day were apprenticeships where like he was learning about it, but he was also tagging along and like being like, oh, how do you think this person got murdered?
Okay.
So he eventually ends up becoming a medical examiner in Boston. And through her friendship with George McGrath, she discovered how difficult it was to investigate violent deaths. Coroners at the time were not required to have medical degrees, and the police were not trained in how to properly gather medical evidence without accidentally ruining it. Because of this, many murders simply went free because of the ignorance and poor training.
Coroners still don't have to have.
Yes.
You just have to have a high school degree and then get elected.
Yes.
Oh, that's wild. I thought you'd at least need like undergrad or something.
No. Same thing with like
Democracy!
becoming a sheriff. You just need. I think you just need a high school degree. And
Wait, like, do you have to be like a police officer first?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah, but like
that's
chief of
elected.
police, you need to have a degree to be
I see,
chief
I
of
see.
police.
Oh,
But
really?
sheriff-
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought you just worked your way up.
Oh, by the way, Sienna is starting police school in 2 days. So
Academy.
police school.
I don't start the academy till September.
I'm sorry.
Sienna's gonna be a police in 2 days.
Yes.
And Rihanna's getting deployed.
I'm not getting deployed.
So Rihanna is a future army soldier.
That I am.
Back to Frances.
Her parents passed away in the early 1930s, and she received a gigantic inheritance, which contributes to her philanthropic passions later on. She did do good with it. She helped establish the Department of Legal Medicine in Harvard in 1931, which was the only program of its kind in North America at the time. She became an advocate for forensic science. 3 years later, in 1934, Frances also established the George Burgess McGrath Library of Legal Medicine when she gifted the department with a collection of her books and manuscripts.
I think it's kind of funny that she named the whole library after her brother's best friend.
Yeah, maybe they were more than best friends.
She
Well,
was divorced, and that's risque to be divorced as a woman at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Someone had to be taking care of her.
Not to mention-
she was
Well, no,
taking care
she really
of, she
did
was taking
need
care
it,
of herself.
Yeah, they were super close because she even gave McGrath the chair of the department once that position was created. And we're all like, we've been speculating.
Probably
over
created
here.
it for him. Sorry.
She probably did. So she, in the source, there are a couple sources. At some point, one of them said in 1936, she gifted the Department of Legal Medicine at Harvard with a $250,000, which in 2005 dollars, because the source had calculated it for me and I didn't go and calculate it in today's money. So it would be like a lot more than it is now. But in 2005, that translated to $3,367,000.
If you had to guess, what would it be today?
Girl,
Like how much?
I don't know how inflation works.
Yeah, neither do I. I want to say 4 million, but I think
wanna say
that's way
4.
too high. I want
I
to say
feel
like 3.5.
No,
or
I think
6.
4 is
I think 4
good.
is-
Okay.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think.
Right.
Don't cheat.
Interactive.
You can check your answer later.
But anyway, so me and Sienna were thinking that she probably gave this money to them as like an endowment for the legal program, like the legal medicine program, instead of just being like, hey, like, can you start this? So anyway, she was using her wealth for good, regardless.
Yippee. Slay girl boss.
Power.
If you don't know what slay girl boss means, go in the last episode and figure it out.
Or just use
aggressive.
Urban Dictionary at your own discretion.
Yes.
By 1936, Harvard was working on graduating medical examiners, but violent deaths were still going unsolved because the law enforcement did not know how to handle or even identify important medical evidence. Frances noticed this and decided to start the Harvard seminars in homicidal investigation. That is a mouthful. Later, this was renamed to the Harvard Association in Police Science, or HAPS, yippee little nickname, which was specifically targeted to the needs of law enforcement. Frances would organize and manage both the curriculum for these week-long seminars with the help from both Harvard as well as those who were specialized in forensic research. In 1943, Frances was appointed captain of the New Hampshire State Police. She was the first woman in the United States to do so. I'm not entirely sure how she became a police captain. Evan and I low-key looked this up and could not figure out how she became a police captain, but probably because she had like extensive work on like policing, and also like she had a lot of money and like kind of knew what she was doing. So, slay her for captain.
Yes, so the first HAPS seminar was held in 1945. Frances invited experts to attend the lecture, and also some of these people were giving their own lectures during the seminar on matters that are important to death investigation, such as identifying the victim, determining the time of death, the role that information played in an investigation, and interrogation techniques. Question mark? I don't know about that
I'm
one.
asking you.
Well, about 20 to 25 policemen of all ranks would be invited to each seminar, and upon completion, each graduate became a member of HAPS and then was invited to a larger network of investigators. At the end of the week, they had a fancy dinner that was often served in the Ritz. I'm pretty sure this is how, or part of why, they were getting these people to like come, because like for a seminar, it's usually like you go and you volunteer for it. You're usually not paid more or anything like that, so you're taking time out of your own like personal life to go do this. But like, I mean, a dinner at the Ritz at the time, that was
Fancy.
like that was luxury.
Very fancy.
Luxury. Also, she left all these participants with a sense of fellowship, as well as network of highly other trained, investigators. So if they had a really difficult case, they could go consult their new friends.
Now that I think about it, 1945, isn't that World War II?
Yes.
So that's probably why it was so low.
Probably. You mean like the
amount of people they had involved?
Yeah, because like policing back then was mostly men.
Yeah.
And most of the men were in the war.
I see. That might also contribute to her being hired as captain.
Yeah.
She,
Oh,
yeah.
That would make sense.
That kind of sucks. This was a really inopportune time to start doing all of this.
Yeah.
Or
No,
it was the
good.
most opportune because there was no one to do it, and so she's like, I gotta take this up.
Yeah, so they'll actually listen to her because no one else is there.
Yeah.
Because at this time they were like more okay with women having like jobs.
Oh yeah.
So that's probably why she
they
was
needed
like
to fill the workforce.
Yeah, she was probably slightly taken a little more seriously.
Okay. Connect.
What a good
Joe.
connection, I know.
Well, I'm not so
The
sure.
neurons are fired.
They actually work, guys.
Yippee! So the link of this source was down, but someone had stated that Lee took a special interest in training police officers because as they were the first to arrive on the scene of a crime, they had to recognize and preserve evidence critical to solving the case. At the time, most of the police officers were inadvertently botching cases by touching, moving, or failing to identify evidence. Lee was also extremely interested in better integrating the work of and communication among medical experts, police officers, and forensic investigators, also prosecutors. So by looking at the work that she's done up to this point, you can tell that she's really passionate about this.
However, Frances knew that things were not perfect in the seminar alone. There was yet another flaw. Hands-on training for these police officers during the seminars was impossible due to time constraints, privacy concerns, and the fact that evidence was easily corrupted, not to mention the unlikeliness that violent crimes would occur during this week-long seminar. So this is when Frances started to create crime models, a tool she named the Nutshell Studies of Unexplained Death. Very girly pop. I think she started her models in like 1944, right before the seminars, and she thought that the models of the crime scenes would be perfect for teaching because they were detailed, they were realistic enough, and you couldn't, like, they wouldn't corrode over time, or they couldn't be like messed up. Like, she would spend time making these miniatures perfect, so that people could study them.
So the Nutshells studies consisted of 18 to 20. There was a range depending on the numbers and like the source. Miniature crime scene dioramas for student analysis. I'm pretty sure she created 20 of them, but there are only 18 surviving today. Each was a crime scene as it would have appeared to the first investigator to arrive. Some of these scenes involved stabbings, hangings, strangulations, shootings, and deaths with unknown causes. There was a carpenter at the Rocks in New Hampshire, which was her summer home for her family and at the time as well her permanent residence, who helped her accomplish some of the initial building and did like carpentry. However, she attended to all of the details herself. Frances painstakingly knit tiny socks and sweaters, designed wallpaper, and wrote tiny manuscripts and labeled kitchen items. When she started the project in 1944, she had often had a hard time finding the materials needed for these, especially metals, due to the wartime rationing. However, she somehow managed to get everything that she needed to make and achieve incredible realism.
So the nutshells were built between 1944 and 1948 and were put to immediate use after their completion in the Harvard seminars. A person attending the seminar would have 90 minutes to study one of the nutshells and then list and interpret the clues. Each scene, which was to my knowledge based on a real murder, had several inconsistencies. These solutions to the murders were, and still are, kept in a safe somewhere. But the purpose of these models was not to solve the murders. So, like, it wasn't like, oh, how do you think this, like, happened? You wouldn't just jump to conclusions. You had to learn the process of, oh, let's say this is in the kitchen, and then there's a drawer that's ever so slightly pulled open. Maybe somebody opened that before, like, they have it. And then you open the drawer, and then, oh, there's a little, like, piece of blood, drop of blood. But it's just to learn how to observe crime scenes, how to systematically sort through evidence.
Correct. So, Frances passed away in 1962 at 84 years old. I believe in her summer home at the Rocks, but we were having trouble finding that information. The nutshells were used at Harvard until 1966, until Harvard's Department of Legal Medicine was dissolved. They were then transferred to the office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Baltimore, where they are still used to this day for an annual seminar. One of Frances's friends, Earl Stanley Gardner, who is well known for his work on the Perry Mason mysteries, wrote that a person studying these models can learn more about circumstantial evidence in an hour than he could learn in months of abstract study.
The nutshell.
Sorry.
Oh, I apologize. Please speak.
Okay. What, like, How was she still like contributing to like the legal place and like forensics and like miniatures into her old age, or did she kind of retire? Like,
So after her like building of them, because she completed building them in 48, and I think she was doing seminars with them, like probably up until she was done creating them, and probably a little bit after. But right after that, there's like not much information on her. So I'm kind of just assuming here that hopefully she was still, maybe working as the police captain and then retired or did like some extra work. And I'm sure she was still advocating for all these things, but I do think that she eventually took like her retirement.
or maybe if there was like a board for like that.
Or like a board of trustees or something.
She'd be on that.
Probably.
Yeah.
The nutshells were eventually recognized as works of art, and in October of 2017 to January of 2018, the 18 surviving models were put into an exhibition titled Murder is Her Hobby at the Renwick Gallery in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. This was the first time that Frances came to the attention of the wider public. It absolutely blows my mind that this was the first time that her models were properly photographed. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, we will be inserting pictures of some of her models. Here's a model right over Rihanna's face.
Wow.
I would also like to hold one.
Thank you.
The nutshells also inspired TV shows including CSI, Crime Scene Investigation. Do, 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 do.
Which, honestly, kind of a bad thing. You know the CSI effect?
No, what is that?
What is that?
CSI effect. Say I am innocent, I committed a murder, but then the prosecution pulls up like my blood, my fingerprints, and like just like other like definitive scientific evidence.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's like a bunch of circumstantial evidence. I have an alibi and all this stuff. Pretend that wasn't actually, I don't know.
Basically, there's scientific evidence that says you committed the crime, but you have a reason, and like you didn't commit the crime, but because there's scientific evidence that suggests you did, you're more likely to be prosecuted.
Yes, the jurors are like, scientific evidence. That has to mean that you did it.
I see.
So if you're
The
not
CSI effect. Okay.
if you're not like
Thank
really
you.
well versed in like science things, you might like be prone to maybe taking like
Scientific
this is
facts more
scientific
seriously.
And
fact.
especially if the prosecution, like, well, they will take that to their advantage and they'll twist the words to make it sound like that.
Right.
And because like jurors are literally picked to not be not smart, but like well versed. They're not supposed to be well versed in like forensics and medicine and anything to do with involving the case,
Right.
to make them more susceptible to like the prosecution. So the CSI effect, bad.
Interesting.
Okay. Cool. Even though Frances is not well known to the general person, she's impacted each and every one of us through her contribution to investigation. She's had a direct hand in improving the methods that are used to catch the bad people and bring them to justice. I'd said bad guys either, but that is not all inclusive.
Women can be bad too. Got that.
Don't forget the non-binaries.
Bad individuals.
The bad people.
She also proved
Yes.
that traditional feminine crafts as described back in like the olden days, can be used as tools in forensic medicine, which is definitely not a traditionally female field. Frances's life can also teach us that we are never too old to pursue a new passion. Her certainly left behind a legacy, and perhaps hers will too.
The end. Episode 3 over. Yippee!